We're here in our schedule, the ADCS Lab out. So that's just that's the secure lab, essentially. Um, Now let's see. If we go on over to content, you got a fair amount of time for this, by the way. Here, let me just go back. Intergalactic. Boop, beep, beep, beep. Yeah, I give you a lot of time for this. That's partly because you're not having a lot of class time for it, right? So if we need to bump this up a little bit, I'm okay with that because of that reason. Okay. Um, so there is one lab given over to ADCS lab time. That being said, I've made this a little easier than the previous one was, so it's not going to be as brutal as it has been in the past. Um, but we're going to call this a tentative timeline here. Okay, I'm a little bit flexible about it. Okay. Okay, so if you click in here, a couple of things. There's the actual lab doc and there's the script. If you click on the script, it's just going to open up a separate window. Okay. So the best thing to do is just right click, save as. Okay. Because it's just a text file, and that's partly Brightspace being a little wonky or just a little paranoid about scripts. So, which that's fair enough. But yeah, so I'd suggest that you right click and save because if you copy and paste, I don't know what Brightspace is doing. Hopefully, it's a raw file. But they tend to put things in viewers and stuff like that. I don't know if they're massaging it in any way. So right click and save seems to work well. Now I'll go over, there's a lot of details in this lab. I won't kill you with them, but I do want to be kind of clear about, oh, that's not right. What the heck? Hold on a second. Oh. Okay, hold on. I think I put the wrong one up there. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. There we go. I just opened the wrong one. Okay, that's better. I'm happy now. Okay, so there are quite a few details in this. What I want you to do is create an IIS web server. So you're going to harken back to the web server course because a lot of the stuff that you did there, you're going to do here, but more as a review. That's a refresh. However, what we want to do is properly secure everything. So you're going to install certificates. We're also going to put you behind a NAT firewall. Okay. So I figure those are a couple of security features that one are a bit of a pain in the ass, and two, that's why they didn't do them in the first web server course. So they're a bit of a pain, which throws some extra challenges at you. But it's also they're both things that are expected in industry. If you're going to run these things, you should know how to fix them up so that they can work in a production environment. Now, this is not 100% production, just because there's a few things I wouldn't do this way. Like I'd probably have a demilitarized zone. I didn't want to complicate it too much, and we're already doing that in Exchange Server, so I didn't want to duplicate either. But the idea here is I want you to deal with the NAT firewall rules with respect to the servers. You're going to see that web servers are no problem, but FTP servers are a little bit of a pain. They're not that bad, but it takes a little research. You have to understand how it works. So, okay, so the requirements: you can use any two-tier ADCS infrastructure that you have, but I do need the ca.ca domain. Okay, so if you're not using that domain name, you should build a fresh one. I'm actually okay if you just use someone else's because they're all pretty identical, and that's just kind of the background. Okay, so it's all right if you need to borrow a buddy's, that kind of thing, so long as it's functioning well. That's really the thing. Okay, You should run the script from a domain account named firstname.lastname. That's an essential feature of the script run because I grab your first name and your last name in order to query DNS. Okay. So, for example, you should have I'll be using a Matthew.Saunders account when I log in. Now, you're going to use a domain joined client. I'm going to give you an example from one that's not domain joined, like when I just kind of demo it, just because I didn't do that. But for you, I want to emphasize it should be a domain account. Okay, and part of the reason is we want all the certs in the domain to function properly. Okay, so the script is going to use this information, the domain, the first name, the last name, in order to do some querying. Your IIS web server should have a specific name, so 2515-IIS, and it should be joined to your AD domain, and it should have this static IP address. Okay. Now, what I want is for there to be two different sites in IIS. One of them is going to be 2515 your first name. So for me, that would be 2515-matt.ca.ca. And the other one would be my last name, 2515-saunders.ca.ca. So you've got to substitute your own name into each of those two sites, and they should serve out different content. Okay, so you should make it so that it's fairly obvious that these are different locations. So put a different image there, something like that. Even if it's just a text file, I don't really care. But make sure that I can see how they're different. Okay, and this is going to be a demo that you have to do. Each site should have a separate root folder, so they're not serving from the same place. Under inetpub, named after your site. So 2515-Matt, 2515-Saunders. Okay. Both sites should respond on SSL. And, in terms of redirecting traffic to port 80, you could just close port 80. I really don't care about the redirect. Okay. Because I don't want it open on the firewall itself. So whatever happens internally, I'm not going to sweat it too much. A third host name, 2515-FTP, should also resolve to the server, and we're going to use that for FTP access. Okay. Now, the idea with these three names, and actually we've got four because the original server name is this, right? But the idea here is that one single certificate should be used for all four host names. Okay. So anybody who's visiting the website via Edge browser, not IE, because IE is a little less picky. I want it to be Edge. They shouldn't get any certificate errors. So just like in the exercise we did. Okay. Now, FileZilla is not going to trust the certificate out of the box no matter what, because they don't use the certificate store. But once you accept it, and once we actually inspect and download the certificate, Windows should say that it's okay. All right. So yeah, Windows trusts it, but FileZilla won't. We'll have to make a decision about whether we trust it or not. That's just the way FileZilla works. Okay. So when you're doing your demo, you're going to connect in to each of the two sites using Edge, and you're going to connect into the FTP site using FileZilla, using their DNS names. So you should have DNS-A records for all three of the external host names that we're going to use. So 2515-IIS is not going to be used externally. That's going to be the internal name of the server. But these other ones, they should resolve to external IPs on the router. So it should be the WAN IP of the router. Okay, and you're going to have to create those DNS records manually yourself. Your Windows client VM should be joined to the domain. It should be on VMnet 8. So everything else is going to be on VMnet 4, but he's going to be on the outside. Now, how do you join him to the domain? Well, you join him to the domain first, then you move him over to VMnet 8. Okay, but the idea here is that he'll get all of the certs that he needs. Once all those certs are in place, then move him over to VMnet 8, and he should accept the certificate authority that you have set up. Okay. Now, in terms of the NAT configuration, I want NAT redirection to allow DNS to your DC. So we're going to use it as the DNS server. That is not a production activity. You don't point to your DC server externally. But I don't want to set up too complicated a setup here. So it's only worth 15%. Maybe if it was worth 20, I'd have you have another DNS server or something. But we're going to just poke a hole and go to go to the DC. Okay. And then I also want you to poke a hole so that HTTPS and FTPS go to your web server. That's going to be multiple holes. Okay. FTPS is a little bit needy, so be prepared for that. Your Windows client VM should use the WAN interface IP address of the router as its DNS. Okay. Now, if it's pointing to the WAN interface IP of the router and you're redirecting that to your DC, that essentially means that your DC is going to be your DNS. And so our domain join client is still going to be able to query everything within the LAN. Okay. No host file manipulation should be done here. So we've kind of cheated in the past a little bit with things in some circumstances. But in this case, I want it all to work purely with DNS. So if you're doing a bit of testing and you want to do a quick host file edit, that's fair enough. But when you're actually running the script and you're doing the demo for me, the host file shouldn't be playing any role. Okay. Okay, suggestions. Use your VM infrastructure if it's functioning well. Otherwise, rebuild or get one from somebody else that works. Okay. Make prudent use of snapshots and backups. That's not too serious in this particular assignment. It's not that dangerous really compared to say Exchange. But evaluate as you go. You want to be a little careful. You should demonstrate a client successfully obtaining and accessing the certificate needed to make the connections work without error. And this should include showing certificate details. So I'll ask questions if I need to see more, right? When you're doing your demo. The demo should be like no more than, it should be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, So you just have to get it running and then call me over and I'll work on it. So that is going to be an in-person thing. I don't really care which class it's in because I'll have the files ready to go anyways. But just if things are busy in a class, it'll have to wait for another class. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a harder deadline for submitting your files and a looser deadline for the demo, because once you've submitted your files, you're kind of committed. And the demo, I know there could be a mad rush for people to try and show all their stuff. I don't want it to be a mad rush, so you can kind of more lackadaisically show me the demo later, okay? But don't go too far. We're talking like a couple weeks after the due date, nothing else, okay? So your site should be accessible from outside the LAN using the WAN interface as the client's primary DNS server. FTPS is picky about firewalls, so you're going to have to research this. I do have a little link down at the bottom which helps with that to make it work. Internal connections are a lot easier. That's why I'm throwing that at you. It's a little bit harder, okay? But it's also very commonly found. The password on the router, you could just reset yourself. You've done that before, right? So what I need you to deliver is one in-person demo of your solution. So with your client on VMnet 8, domain joined, accessing the certificates, showing the client VMnet and ipconfig/all output, Edge browser and FileZilla client connecting successfully, showing the certificate details upon connection. So we'll just look through those kind of briefly on our together. I want a screenshot of your NAT rules from your router just to see what you've punched through in terms of holes. The output of the script, DMIT 2515-secure apps, and this should be run on the client system, okay? As domain, not as domain administrator. That's a mistake. I'll correct that. That should be your first name dot last name account. Okay. And all output should be found on your C:/client. You want to export your certificate. That's going to be part of your submission. A feedback Word document. And I don't need a router really. So I think the NAT screenshot should be good enough. So everything could be submitted to Brightspace. Okay. If you're missing anything, I'll scratch that out too. I forgot about this. We don't need the router. But if you're missing anything, I'll let you know one way or another. But if you can't produce that item, I may not be able to grade you. It depends on what's missing, you know. Okay, so this is how you're graded. You just visit that and go over it before you submit. Okay, it's worth 15 marks for the 15%. There's the web server setup. There's the network tasks. We're going to test those. And there's the client functionality. So what's happening on the client side? Does it work at the basic level? Okay. Part marks are possible. So it may be, you know, you came up with a certificate, but you're actually using multiples instead of one. I could give you part marks for that. There's some useful links here just to give you an idea of how to do you know, various items. So there's Netgate dealing with NAT. There's CSR creation for SSL. That's less useful, but the top one here, installing secure FTP, you're going to find that pretty useful. Okay. Now I'll just give you a quick demo of the script. So let's go over to my handy dandy. I just took the firewall. Sorry, not the firewall. The forensic workstation. Um, so what I've got here is my forensic workstation is going to be my client. Okay, it's not on the domain, so that's not quite accurate, but everything else is pretty good. If I do a who am I just created a Matthew.Saunders account, but it's just local. Yours should be on the domain ca.ca, right? Now, the script is right here, so I'm just going to cd/users Matthew.Saunders desktop. And then just to look over here, I've got pfSense with its rules. I've got my DC, OLCA, which I probably shouldn't need to have on, and the web server here. Okay, so the web server's got the bulk of the configs, and then the firewall router has the rest of them. Right. So we're just going to run this script, and what it does, Camel, you can use it not just for submission, but you can actually use it for testing things a little bit. Okay. So you can run it as many times as you like, but what it'll do is it'll actually check port connections. It'll check whether it can query DNS. It'll check whether you've configured the client to use the appropriate DNS, right? So here it's like it's figuring out the WAN IP address by assuming that it's the primary DNS server that's set on this system, right? So then it gets this, which is what I've set it to. And then it goes and it starts connecting to that IP address to check for HTTPS connectivity. It sees that there is some. This is very basic connectivity checks. Okay. Now it's checking HTTP. That should fail because we don't really want that open. Okay. And then once it's done, it'll move on to, now it's checking DNS. The whole thing takes a minute, minute and a half, something like that. Now it's checking for FTP connections. So if you're trying to get functionality working and things aren't really going the way you think they should, this can give you some tips as to what's going wrong. Okay, so for example, this all works perfectly. Okay, it's not testing every single thing, but I'll show you what it does gather for us here. So it's not checking the certs, whether they're any good or anything like that. But it does grab the cert, makes an effort at that. However, you want to check that it's the correct cert. Okay, so I would do a manual inspection. I tell you to make sure that just pop it in. I already have a copy. You just want to make sure it's actually a good copy. Okay. And then if I go into details, certification path, right? See, this is not. Is this no? Yeah, the issuer couldn't be found. That's because I haven't joined this machine to the domain, right? So I would normally get more details, which would say, yeah, this is all good. But not being part of the domain, it doesn't check out. Okay. And then I just gather a little bit of information about DNS resolution and stuff like that. Okay. So that's what it should look like. There's also uh, basically a copy of the script output. But I'd like you to take a screenshot of this when you're submitting. Okay, just partly because it's color coded, I can actually see things a little more easily than if I'm just staring at text. So let's just say I suspend this bad boy, the web server. Okay. So he's not going to be responding on anything at this point. And now I rerun this. Just so you have an idea of what kind of information it'll give you. Now, when things fail, the script will take longer because it's going to be waiting for timeouts and stuff like that. So here it's saying, okay, I'm trying to connect to 443. That's not working. That's not working because I suspended this, right? So even though I have a NAT rule, there's nothing to reach on the other end. Okay. And then you'll get that nice little. So the color coding kind of sticks out for me, helps me see that, some things didn't work, all that kind of stuff. And this is a good, you can run this yourself and just say, oh, okay, I didn't do that. I got to fix that, right? So this is going to produce more errors as we go. The DNS will work, but all of the other connections directly to the server are going to fail, and so from that, you can kind of use that as hints to kind of fix up anything that's not quite working for you. It won't fix everything, though. So FTPS, there's a lot of ports that need to open. Not all of them are well defined. You kind of have to choose a range. I can't really scan for those, not very easily at least. So that'll just be part of the demo. Okay. Same thing with inspecting the certificates. That'll have to be part of the demo. Okay. Any questions? I know it's a lot of detail, so you have to digest it a bit. All right, then. I'll let you guys do it. Yeah, so you have this class and one other class to work on it. Okay. What else? Next week, I'm going to do a brief review for the certificates quiz, which is coming up a week from today. Okay. So just a heads up, that's on the way. It's a theoretical quiz. I'll just give you some certs, ask you some questions about them. And we will do a review next class. It won't be too long, though. It's going to be like a 20-minute review. Okay. The other thing is, this is a different class, but for forensics, I'm going to be sending you an email to download a VM in preparation for the quiz tomorrow. Okay. I talked about that in the other class yesterday, but just so you know, I still have to build it. The Brightspace kind of has thrown a little bit of a monkey wrench at me, but I'll send you something today so you have time to download it. Okay. All right. I'll let you guys go to it. If you need anything, I'll be hanging around.